You are about to witness a story of impossible trust. A massive grizzly bear, Kodiak, saw Ranger Jake Wheeler holding her dying cub in the harshest Teton blizzard. What she did next should have been fatal. The wind howled a death song across the Wyoming peaks. Kodiak launched herself, 300 pounds of raw, wild power aimed at Jake's back. Her attack was instinct, honed over years of survival in the Grand Teton National Park. This man, this human, was a threat, and threats were destroyed with savage efficiency. Jake couldn't run. He couldn't fight. All he could do was stand in the blinding white storm, clutching the tiny, lifeless form of the grizzly cub, Willow. In that heart-stopping, split-second arc through the snow, something inexplicable happened. Kodiak's powerful nose caught a scent. It wasn't the metallic tang of fear, nor the harsh cold of the storm. It was a faint, warm echo buried deep in the bear's primal memory. Cedar smoke, strong black coffee, and the specific, comforting scent of a human who had once been family. She stopped. Mid-leap, her claws began to retract, and she twisted her colossal body violently. She landed 5 feet from Jake, sending a cloud of snow into the air. Jake spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. Kodiak stood over him, magnificent and terrifying. Her breath smoked in the frigid air. Jake knew her. 7 years ago, she was a tiny cub. He named her Kodiak. He saved her from poachers. He broke every rule the National Park Service had. He loved her. Kodiak lowered her head, sniffing the tiny bundle in Jake's arms. The cub, Willow, gave a weak, wet cough, a sound of fluid filling tiny lungs. Kodiak looked at Jake, and in those deep, ancient eyes, Jake saw recognition. He saw a mother's terror. He saw a desperate, impossible plea. She chose not to kill him. She chose to trust him. Willow was fading fast. Jake knew it was pneumonia. Without intervention, without immediate, intense human aid, Willow would die by nightfall. He had to get her to his remote cabin. It was a brutal 10-mile hike. But why did a grizzly stop an attack only to choose her former human protector? Jake fumbled for his radio. "Base, this is Ranger Wheeler. I have a Class A situation. Grizzly cub, severe respiratory distress. I am initiating emergency transport to my cabin." The voice that crackled back was sharp, educated, and icy. Director Kenneth Vance. Vance was the new head of the NPS Rocky Mountain region, a man who believed the rules of bureaucracy were more important than any one animal. "Negative, Wheeler. Protocol clearly states you are to document the location and withdraw. Nature must take its course. Do not interfere. I repeat, do not interfere." Jake looked at Kodiak, who was now standing closer, her massive head low, watching. He looked at Willow, barely breathing. Nature take its course? No, not when he knew he could save her. Jake didn't argue. He clicked the radio off, severing the connection. He put Willow inside his heavy, worn coat. Kodiak watched, then silently turned and began to follow. Jake began to walk, pushing his way into the deepening white hell of the Wyoming storm. The hike was a nightmare. The snow was hip-deep in places, and the altitude of the Teton Range clawed at his lungs. Kodiak stayed 30 feet behind him, a magnificent, ghostly shadow. She wasn't leading, she was escorting. 2 hours in, his radio crackled back to life. It was Mark Sullivan, Jake's deputy, and his only friend left in the NPS. "Jake, he's losing it. He's calling this insubordination and endangering federal resources. They're talking immediate termination and an investigation." Mark's voice was tight with fear. "He already terminated me, Mark," Jake rasped. Every breath a struggle. It's worse, Jake. He's frozen your retirement account, the one you built over 40 years of service. He's threatening to seize the cabin itself. He said unless you comply, you lose everything. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was Jake's whole American life. His future security, his home, the legacy of 4 decades of service in the wilderness. Jake stopped. He looked at the tiny cub tucked against his heart. He looked back at Kodiak, who also paused, her gold-flecked eyes fixed on him. "Mark," Jake said, his voice quiet but firm, "some things are worth more than a pension. Willow is alive. I can save her. Vance is wrong. You know he's wrong." A long silence followed. Only the savage wind spoke. Mark had a family, a mortgage. The choice was agonizing. "My GPS shows you're near the old Grove Entre crossing," Mark finally said, his voice a low rumble. "I could theoretically be in that area for a routine perimeter check in about 45 minutes. I have my emergency medical kit and a satellite phone. But Jake, if he catches me..." "Mark, don't do this. I can't let you risk your life for my mistake." "I'm not doing it for you, Jake," Mark snapped. "I'm doing it for the Yellowstone spirit we swore to protect. Keep the radio silent. I'll find you." The line went dead. Jake felt a sudden rush of warmth and loyalty that cut through the cold. He was not alone. You won't believe what the ranger risked next. It wasn't just his life. It was his entire future. He pushed on, fueled by renewed determination, now carrying the weight of Mark's sacrifice too. Mark arrived, bringing essential supplies and critical light. They stumbled into Jake's small stone cabin just before midnight. The warmth hit them like a physical blow. Willow was barely breathing, her tiny pink gums nearly white. "She's hypothermic," Jake muttered, moving immediately to the fireplace. Then Kodiak filled the doorway. She pushed the door open herself. She stepped into the cabin, into the domain of the human, taking up almost the entire space. Mark froze, his face pale with raw fear. This was a grizzly bear inside a tiny wooden structure. Jake held up a hand. "It's okay, Mark. She just wants to watch her baby." Kodiak moved past the men, directly to the cub near the fire. She settled down, her massive flank pressing against Willow's fragile body. Then she began to purr. It wasn't a fierce rumble. It was a low, sad, rhythmic sound of a mother praying. It was the most heartbreaking sound Jake had ever heard. "Let's get to work, Mark," Jake whispered. "We have a life to save." Hours crawled by. The satellite connection was lost to the storm, isolating them completely. They were running out of time. Dr. Hayes, reached earlier, had given the diagnosis: advanced pneumonia. The mortality rate was over 90%. Jake drew the syringe with a powerful antibiotic. He knew the dosage had to be precise. Too much, and it could kill the cub instantly. He approached Kodiak slowly. She lifted her head, her yellow gold eyes fixing instantly on the needle. Her muscles coiled like steel springs. She knew this was invasive. This was pain. "Easy, girl," Jake murmured, soothing the mother who could end his life with one swipe. "I'm trying to help her. You have to trust me, one last time." Kodiak hesitated. The cabin held its breath. Then slowly the great bear shifted her body, exposing Willow's hind leg. She granted permission. Jake made the injection. The cub didn't flinch. Around 2 a.m., the crisis hit. Willow's breathing changed. Jake checked her temperature. It was spiking dangerously. "Mark, she's seizing. Get the cool compresses." As if triggered by the fear in Jake's voice, Willow's tiny body went rigid, then began to convulse violently on the blanket. Kodiak roared. It was a sound of pure maternal anguish, shaking the very rafters of the cabin. She rose, her fur bristling, her massive paws scraping the wooden floor. She stood over her seizing cub, a terrifying silhouette of pure instinct. Mark was timing the seizure. 20 seconds! Kodiak lunged, but not at Jake. She lunged and placed her body between the fireplace and Willow, shielding her cub from the rising heat, believing the fire was the threat. Jake remembered the vet's instructions. Do not restrain. Keep her on her side. He moved toward the cub, ignoring the massive, distressed grizzly. As he reached out to adjust Willow, Kodiak's paw flashed out, not a killing blow, but a clear, forceful warning. It slammed down inches from Jake's head, kicking up sparks from the fire pit. Jake had to choose in that moment, save the cub's position or save his life. He chose the cub. He lunged past Kodiak's paw and gently rolled Willow onto her side, ensuring her airway was clear. Kodiak's head lowered. She sniffed Jake's hand. She watched his focus. The great bear seemed to process that the man was not hurting her cub. He was helping the cub through the trauma. Mark reported, 1 minute, 30 seconds. It's running its course. The convulsion stopped. Willow went limp, breathing slow and shallow. Jake sank back onto his heels, utterly exhausted. He looked at Kodiak, who returned to her protective position, purring again. Their shared terror had forged their bond into something unbreakable. Twist revelation. Mark, Jake breathed, look at this cub's coat and the water we filtered. She didn't get this from nature. This is human. She picked up the pneumonia from the contaminated runoff near the old abandoned mine upstream. We are fixing a problem we created. This wasn't just about saving an animal. It was about correcting a human injustice against nature. Could this tiny cabin survive the fight brewing outside and in? You're about to see the most extraordinary test of loyalty. The sun rose. The storm began to break, but the mood was heavy. Willow was better, her gums were pink, her breathing had stabilized. But the true storm was about to arrive. Director Vance. The helicopter will be here within the hour, Mark warned, looking out the frost-caked window. Kodiak has to leave, Jake. If Vance sees a grizzly inside a federal property, it's not just termination. It's a national incident. He'll order her destroyed. Jake knelt by Kodiak. He placed a gentle hand on her massive head. Listen to me, girl. They're coming. The bad men who believe in rules, not trust. I am going to keep Willow safe here. I will make her strong. You have to go now. You have to be free for her. You have to trust me one last time. Kodiak looked at him. She rose slowly, pressed her head against his chest in a quick, powerful gesture of acknowledgement. And then she walked to the door. She paused, looked back at Willow, and vanished into the bright, fresh snow of the Teton forest. The roar of the military-grade helicopter blades shattered the morning silence. Vance had arrived. He strode into the cabin, rigid, his face a mask of disapproval. He bypassed the cub and fixed his gaze on Jake. Wheeler, you are officially terminated. I have the paperwork right here. You violated direct orders, you endangered a federal asset, and you destroyed your career for one animal. She has a name, Jake countered calmly, and she's alive. Something your protocol guaranteed she wouldn't be. Vance pulled a thick manila envelope from his pocket, the termination papers, the seizure notice for the cabin, the document sealing Jake's retirement. This is the end. Wheeler, I am an administrator. I deal in policy, not sentiment. Mark stepped in. Sir, with all due respect, you need to understand that this isn't random. This is Kodiak, the grizzly Jake raised. She was right here, watching us, trusting us. This isn't policy, sir. This is a miracle. Vance's expression finally cracked. He looked at the tiny sleeping cub, then at the massive paw print still visible in the snow on the floor. He wrestled with his own convictions. He had always believed in the cold, hard logic of the law. He walked to the fireplace. He looked at the manila envelope in his hands. He looked at the gentle rise and fall of Willow's chest. He paused for a long moment, then, without a word, he threw the entire stack of termination and seizure papers into the raging fire. The documents caught instantly, curling and blackening into ashes. The entire future of Jake Wheeler, his job, his home, his pension, went up in smoke. "I still believe in the rules, Wheeler," Vance said, his voice gruff. "But I have learned that there are exceptions. You are on indefinite probation. Now focus on the cub. We'll deal with the paperwork later." Vance left. The silence left behind was deafening. The ultimate antagonist had been defeated, not by force, but by a mother's trust. What happened the moment the feds arrived changed everything. But the real victory was still waiting. Weeks became months. Willow grew strong. Jake fed her, taught her to hunt, and kept her world as wild as possible. Mark helped monitor Kodiak's territory in the High Teton Meadow. It was time. On a perfect late spring morning, Jake, Mark, and Vance drove the crate up to the Alpine Meadow. Vance said nothing, his presence a silent testament to his change of heart. Jake opened the crate. Willow hesitated, then bounded out, her paws hitting the soft, wild earth for the first time as a healthy cub. She looked back at Jake, gave a small, acknowledging chuff, and vanished into the granite outcrops. Jake watched the empty space, tears freezing on his cheeks. He had given her back to the wild. He had kept his promise. Then Vance pointed toward the western ridge. A magnificent figure stood silhouetted against the bright blue sky. Kodiak. She was waiting, and next to her, a smaller, quicker shadow appeared. Willow had found her. Jake raised his hand in a silent salute. Across the vast, impossible distance, Kodiak turned her head toward him one last time. It was a farewell. It was a promise kept. The two bears turned and walked together over the ridge, disappearing into the vastness of the Teton wilderness, free, whole, and home. Jake stood in silence until Vance placed a hand on his shoulder. "I still don't get the numbers, Wheeler," Vance admitted quietly, "but I get the life. You won." Jake looked up at the mountains. 7 years ago, I saved a cub who lost her mother. Today, that cub has her daughter back because of a moment of trust. That's the true American wild. Jake smiled. He had risked his life, his pension, his career, and his home. But he had saved a life, restored a family, and in doing so, had healed the divide between man and nature. The cycle was complete, and somewhere out there, a grizzly mother was teaching her daughter to live, having learned that one man, at least, was worth trusting. If this story of hope and unbreakable bonds moved you, hit the like button, tell us what you would have done in the comments below, and subscribe to see which incredible wildlife rescue we witness next week.